Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Chapter 12. The Polyjuice Potion. They stepped on the stone staircase at the top, and Professor McGonagall tapped on the door. It opened silently, and they entered. Professor McGonagall told Harry to wait and left him there alone. Harry looked around. One thing was certain. Of all the teachers' offices Harry had visited so far in this year, Dumbledore was by far the most interesting. If he hadn't been scared out of his wits that he was about to be thrown out of school, he should have been very pleased to have a chance to look around it. It was a large and beautiful circular room full of funny little noises. A number of curious silver instruments stood on spindle-legged table, rearing and emitting little puffs of smokes. The walls were covered with portraits of old headmasters and headmistresses, all of whom were snoozing gently in their frames. There was also an enormous claw-footed desk, and sitting on a shelf behind it, a shabby, tattered wizard hat, the Sorting Hat. Harry hesitated. He cast a wary eye around the sleeping witches and wizards on the walls. Surely it couldn't hurt if he took the hat down and tried it on again, just to make sure it had put him in the right house. He walked quietly around the desk, lifted the hat from its shelf, and lowered it slowly onto his head. It was too much large and slipped down over his eyes, just as it had done the last time he put it on. Harry stared at the black inside of the hat, waiting. A small voice said in the air, Be in your bonnet, Potter." "Oh, yes," Harry murmured. Sorry to bother you. I want to ask. You've been wondering whether I put you in the right house," said the hat smartly. "Yes, you're particularly difficult to place, but I stand by what I've said before." Harry's heart leapt. "You would have done well in Slytherin." Harry's stomach plummeted. He grabbed the point of the hat and pulled it off. It hung limply in his head, grubby and faded. Harry pushed it back onto itself, feeling sick. "You're wrong," he said aloud to the still and silent hat. It didn't move. Harry backed away, watching it. Then a strange gagging noise behind him made him wheel around. He wasn't alone after all. Standing on a golden perch behind the door was a decipient-looking bird that resembled a half-plucked turkey. Harry stared at it, and the bird looked balefully back, making its gagging noise again. Harry thought it looked very ill. Its eyes were dull, and even as Harry watched, a couple more feathers fell out his hair. Harry was just thinking that's all he knew for Dumbledore's pet bird to die while he was alone in the office with it, when the bird burst into flames. Harry yelled in shock and backed away into the desk. He looked furiously around the case. There was a glass of water somewhere but couldn't see one. The bird, meanwhile, had become a fireball. It gave one loud shriek, and next second there was nothing but a smoldering pile of ash on the floor. The office door opened. Dumbledore came in looking very somber. "Professor," Harry gasped, "you bird, I couldn't do anything. He just caught fire." To Harry's astonishment, Dumbledore smiled. "About time, too," he said. "He'd been looking dreadfully for days. I've been telling him to get a move on." He chuckled at the stunned look at Harry's face. Fox is a phoenix, Harry. Phoenix burst into flame when it is time for them to die and reborn from the ashes. Watch them." Harry looked down in time to see a tiny, wrinkled, newborn bird poke its head out of the ashes. It was quite as ugly as the old one. "It's a shame you had to see him on a burning day," said Dumbledore, seating himself behind the desk. "He is really very handsome most of the time. Wonderful red and gold plumage. Fascinating creature, phoenixes. They can carry immensely heavy, fascinating creatures, phoenix. Lots. Their tears have healing powers, and they make high, faithful pets. In the shock of Fox catching fire, Harry had forgotten what he was there for, but it had come back to him as Dumbledore settled himself in the high chair behind the desk and fixed Harry with his penetrating light blue stare. Before Dumbledore could speak another word, however, the door in the office flew open with an almighty bang, and Harry burst in, a wild look in his eyes. His balaclava perched on the top of his shaggy black hat, and the dead rooster was still swinging from his hand. "It wasn't Harry, Professor Dumbledore," said Hagrid urgently. "I was talking through him seconds before that kid was found. They never had time, sir." Dumbledore tried to say something, but Hagrid went ranting on, waving the rooster around his urgent, sending feathers everywhere. "It can't have been him. I swear it in front of the Ministry of Magic if I have to. Hagrid, yeah, got the wrong boy. Sir, I know Harry never—" "Hagrid!" said Dumbledore loudly. "I do not think that Harry attacked those people." "Oh," said Hagrid, the rooster falling limply at the side. "Right, I'll wait outside there, headmaster." And he stomped out, looking embarrassed. "You don't think it was me, Professor?" Harry leaped hopefully to Dumbledore, brushed rooster feather off his desk. "No, Harry, I don't," said Dumbledore, though his face was somber again. "But I want to talk to you." Harry waited nervously while Dumbledore considered it. The tips of his long fingers together. "I must ask you, Harry, whether there is anything you'd like to tell me," he said gently. "Anything at all?" Harry didn't know what to say. He thought of Malfoy shouting, "You'll be the next Mudbloods!" and the Polyjuice Potion simmering away in Morning Muddle's bathroom. Then he thought of the disembodied voice he had heard twice and remember what Ron had said. Hearing voices no one else can hear isn't a good sign, even in the wizarding world. He thought, too, about what everyone was saying about him, and his growing dread that he was somehow connected with Salazar Slytherin. "No," said Harry, "there isn't anything, Professor." The doubles attack of Justin and nearly Helpless Snake turned what had hitherto been nervousness into real panic. Curiously, it was nearly Helpless Snake's faith that seemed to worry people most. What could possibly do that to a ghost? People asked each other what terribly power could turn someone who was already dead. There was most a stampede to book seat on the Hogwarts Express so the student could go home for Christmas. At this rate, we'll be the only one left, Ron told Harry and Hermione. Us, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle. What a jolly holiday it's gonna be. Crabbe and Goyle, who always did whatever Malfoy did, had signed up to stay over holidays too. But Harry was glad that most people were leaving. He was tired of people skittering around him in the corridors, as though he were about to sprout fangs of speed potion, tired of all the muttering, pointing, and teasing at his past. Fred and George, however, found all this very funny. They went out of their way to march ahead to Harry down the corridor, shouting, "Make way for the heir of Slytherin, seriously evil wizard coming through." Percy was deeply disapproving of this behavior. "It is not laughing matter," he said coldly. "Oh, get out of the way, Percy," said Fred. "Harry is in a hurry." "Yeah, he's off to the Chamber of Secrets for a cup of tea with his fanged servant," said George, chuckling. Ginny didn't find it amusing either. "Oh, don't," she wailed every time Fred asked Harry loudly who he was planning to attack next, or when George pretended to ward him was planning to ward Harry off with a large clove of garlic when they met. Harry didn't mind. It made him feel better that Fred and George at least thought the idea of his being Slytherin's heir was quite ridiculous. But their antics seemed to be grasping Draco Malfoy, who looked increasingly sore each time he saw them at it. "It's because it's bursting to say it's really him," said Ron knowingly. You know how he hates everyone beating him at anything, and you're getting all the credit for his dirty work." "Not for long," said Hermione in a satisfied tone. "The Polyjuice Potion is nearly ready. We'll be getting the truth out of him any day now." At last the term ended, and a silence deep as the snow on the ground descended on the castle. Harry found it peacefully rather than gloomy, and enjoyed the fact Hermione and Weasley's had been round of Gryffindor Tower which meant they could play exploding Snape loudly without bothering anyone, and practicing dueling in private.